Okay, folks, so today we'll be talking about tables. And as far as our book, let me get rid of this. Okay, as far as our book, you've seen this chapter. I think most of you have read it so far. But if you get to chapter 6, that's all about tables. So it'll cover everything you need in here. However, I want to go over a little bit about how it works. So we always start out with the table open and close. Then we're organizing it into basically cells. You can think about this kind of like a spreadsheet where it's got cells, tables, or rows, columns, etc. Whenever you go to something like this, and I see stuff like this all the time for things like stocks or billing, whenever I go and check out like my water bill online, my bank statement, all of that is basically usually done in a format like this, right? So that's tables. We can talk about the basic structure here. So you have an overall table open and close. You have table rows, and each row has multiple points of data in it. So kind of the same thing if I went to the spreadsheet. I have a row here. It's got 1, 2, 3, however many columns in each row. So we want to organize it into rows and then columns, right? So one row here, in this case, has 3 table data. That means we'd have 3 columns going across in the row. The amount of columns is just determined by how many of these table data you put in each row, right? So for experiment's sake, if I went in here and I made a table, for Web 2 we're doing validation today, by the way, which is kind of cool. So how to tell whether or not something is an accurate username. So Web 2 stuff, it's programming, but you can see here, like if it includes an @ sign and the length is equal to or greater than 8 and it's not empty, and it includes a period because everything says something.com or something.org, right? Then it's a valid email address. So if you're curious about Web 2, like this is where we do actual programming to validate stuff. I just happen to have this up, so I want to point that out real quick. Okay, we'll jump over here. Actually, I'll do a new document for tables. We'll just start with fresh one. And tables here. Now we're going to start out with a very basic tag, like table. And once again, this does the open and close for me. I'm just going to hit enter a few times to give it some space. Now if we put in table row here, that's one row, and the amount of table datas, or TDs, I put in it is how many columns we'll have. So let's just check this out. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3 of them. Oops. Okay, now up here, there's not really lines around it, but you can see we have item 1, item 2, item 3. That's 3 items. Let me see if I can make that a little bigger here. That is 3 items in a table. Now if we want to see that table a little bit more, we can start using some CSS. So up here in the head, I'll do the style tags that we should be getting used to at this point. And I'm going to say anything that is a table. It's going to have the following in these curly braces. We'll have a border of thin, border color of black, and a border style of double. Okay, so we have some basics here. What if we were to add one to table data as well? So I'm going to say TD for table data. So we're going to say our border. Now this time I'm going to use a little bit of what we call shorthand. So instead of doing multiple lines like this, I can jump over here and you can often combine these things together. So one option is here, instead of saying all this stuff, border solid, border dash red, border 1 REM solid, remember M's are units, kind of like pixels, border thick, double, etc. So here in border, they're putting the style right there. They're putting what kind of border thick, they're putting the style there, and they're putting the color there all in one line, right? So let's try something like that. I'm just going to grab this, copy. Okay, so we got something like that, right? Let's change this to single Actually, single is not the right term. Maybe thin. I'll do thin. Okay, so notice this is now a dark gray line, and because it's just around the table data, it's only affecting those table data items, right? And because this is the whole table, that's just going around the outside. So, that said, let's see what happens if we add another table data item here. Item 4. Let me make sure this is still recording all right. I think we're good to go. Okay. So we can just basically add on as many as we want. If we keep adding table data here, it's just going to keep adding to the amount of columns, making the table bigger, right? But what happens if we go down here and we make another table row, and then we only put in 2 items? Just for sake of clarity, I'm going to push this stuff all to the next line. Well, it just leaves some empty space here, right? So maybe we want that, maybe we don't. We're going to come to a concept in the book, though, called call span and row span. And what that means is we have 5 items up here, and the way the tables work are the one with the most columns sets the amount of columns that are present in the table. So if I have 2 here and 5 here, well, look, the table is big enough for 5 columns, right? Even if they're not used. So the biggest table row sets the precedence for the amount of columns that can be here, right? Because we have 5 here, all the rows after this will have the space to have 5 columns, even if we don't use it. Now, if we want these 2 to take up the same space that 5 does, we're going to have to use the call span and row span. So the way you do that is I will go into the opening tag of one of these, and I will start to type call span, and then I have to tell it how many table datas I want this one to take up. Well, let's make it 2. So this one here will now take up the room of these 2 if I do this. I'll say 2. Now this takes up the room of 2, right? Now on this one, I'm going to go down and I will say call span equals 3. Okay. Now this one now takes up the same space as 3, right? Does that make sense to everyone so far? Okay, now going downwards, what if we did more rows? Okay, let's make this a 2 as well. So now we have this empty spot right here, right? And we have an empty spot on this line. What if we want this one to vertically come down all the way? Well, in this case, what we're going to do, hold on, I have an error here. I'm missing, let's see, oops, I need the starting table data there. Okay, so what I can do on this, it's the same thing as call span, but now we're going to use row span. And we need to do it on this particular item to make it go downwards. Right? So I'm going to go up here. I just need to figure out which one this is, and it is item 5, right? The last item in this row. And I'm going to type row span equals 3. Now do you see how this one goes all the way down through those empty spots? Okay. So this is the crux of how we make a table. Now here's another thing we can do. We can actually put rows inside table datas and then put more rows inside that. Let me show you first of all in a pictorial guide here what that might look like. So let's say we were using Adobe Illustrator. We have to make what we call wireframes, which are planning out a web page. You just kind of draw it out, like what would be where all the links are, where all the pictures, hero images, stuff like that. So I'll just make a new document here. Cool little fact, there is actually a web section here as far as presets. So if you look up here in web, we have web large. I'll hit that. Go ahead and create it. Now this is in pixels. I could put it in inches, but most web folks do work in pixels, right? So that's fine. I'll leave it as is. Now I'm going to use some colored boxes here to demarcate or kind of notate what is what. First thing I want to do for those of you who are used to Illustrator, I don't want these boxes to have white fills. I'm just basically using outlines around these boxes to figure out sections, right? So I'm going to use this blue box here to figure out where my overall table is. Okay, so in blue, I'm going to write here just so we know what that is. Table. So that's my table tag. I'm going to make sure this box here is blue too. Okay, so that's my table. Now we only use this per table, we only use table open and close once, right? So that's the only time I'm going to see that blue box. Okay, so next we're going to have some table rows. So I'm going to use green here, kind of show that. Changing that color to green. TR for table row, and we're going to make the text green as well. Okay, so I've got my green TR, and I've got this row. Now I'm actually going to copy this and paste it a few times, because usually we have a few rows, right? For a phone call, or? Yes, if it's important, sure. And actually, I can, if you're ever doing something like this in Illustrator, I can, of course, group these. So that's going to make it a little easier. All right, so we'll copy and paste a few. Okay, so we've got a bunch of rows here. Now we know that the amount of table data we put into each row is what's going to determine, and let me make sure nothing's selected here, okay, is what's going to determine how many columns there are. So I'm going to go ahead and make my table rows red here, or my table datas, I mean. So let's say I did one of these. I did one of these. I'm going to use the blend tool real quick here just to kind of fill in the gaps for us real quick. Okay, let's pretend these weren't flipping around. Actually, I'm better just undo that here. Let's try this. Yeah. Okay. This tool is weird. It should put stuff in between, even though this isn't rotating. It wants it to rotate for some reason. So let me see if I can rotate this real quick and get it to not do that. I think it's going to want to do it no matter what. That's okay. Just pretend these look the same, okay? We're going to pretend. All right. So we have a bunch of buttons going across here. Table data is that we put whatever, and they're basically cells, right? Let's do a few more. Let's say we do another table row inside here. Actually, let's go down to the next one. We'll start to split this up. Okay, so let's say I only put in 2 table datas. Oops. See, it'll let me deselect that. Okay. No. See, I shouldn't have used that tool. It was a trap. Okay, there we go. So I'll copy that one. I'm just going to paste it, place a few times. Quick note, folks, if you are using Illustrator, it has a handy little tool here. Actually, that's weird. Hold on. Keeps going into the groups, which I don't want. All right, I'm going to select all of these. If you ever have stuff like this you need to space out, you can go to Window and do Align. And they have the ability here to do a vertical line center and also a distribute object. So if I take this one out to the edge here, and then I select the entire row, and I make it based on aligned to the entire artboard, or to the selection, and hit this. It should space them out. Okay. I don't know. For some reason, Illustrator is just not wanting to cooperate today. Oh, wait. Here we go. Distribute spacing. Nope. Same thing. Well, anyways. We have some things here. Now, what if I wanted to put something inside of this? How could I split up this one table data more? Well, what if I put two rows? Now, this is already inside a row here, right? But what if I put a row inside the table data? Do you think that'll work? Well, let's try it out. We're going to make another table row. Inside here. And in fact, I will make two of them. We just need to make sure, for the sake of our pictorial guide here, that the colors match. So I'm going to use my eyedropper here to make them green. Okay. So we have two table rows here. Now we could still put table datas inside of that too. Do you think I could put additional table rows inside this little table data here? Yep. You could basically go as deep as you want. And what we call this is nesting, when you're putting elements inside other elements, inside other elements. Now you can kind of see when that's happening in Dreamweaver too, because the indenting. Do you see how every time something goes in deeper inside another object, like this is a table row, these are all inside it, right? So notice how they're nested, aka indented inside these and between them. And then everything is indented inside this table because all this stuff's inside a table. So let's go ahead and let's choose one of these table datas here. And I'm actually going to insert a table row inside that. And then inside that table row, we'll do two more table datas. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Table concepts. Okay, now if this ever gets, like this indenting and stuff gets messed up, one thing you can do is go up here, and you're going to see this paint bucket painting into brackets. If you do apply source formatting, that is basically going to try to fix all this formatting stuff so the indents are proper. Oops, I did not want to open Animate. Hold on. Okay, so that fixed the indenting issues here. Now, once again, this indenting and nesting all has to do with that parent-child relationship I might have mentioned a few times. So everything that we see here is inside of body. So technically, table is inside body. Table is a child of the body tag. Table row is a child of the table, meaning it is a grandchild of the body tag, right? Because these are 2 levels deep. And then table data is inside this, meaning it's a great grandchild of the body tag, because they're tags within tags within tags, right? So if we go through here and we do a preview of this, actually let's do this first too. I like to add some background color to table data and table rows to help kind of show what is what. So let's say that any table data has a background color of gray. Any table row, or table in general, a background color of, let's do aquamarine. And I'm going to do table row just for a background color too. So we'll say TR for table row. Anything that's table row is going to have a background color of brown. We'll go ahead and make the color scheme ugly here. Ugly but visible. And we're going to give it, because table row, because it doesn't actually hold content, like it holds table data, but it doesn't have its own content, you tend to not be able to really see it well. So what I'm going to do is add padding. This adds an extra few pixels around the outside just to make it more visible. And that's basically what I'm doing here. Padding 10 pixels. Okay. I'm going to save this again. And we will go ahead and open this up. Now this time, instead of doing a preview, I'm going to go find my actual file and double click it to really open in the browser. Okay, so this is kind of interesting, right? It turned out a little bit odd. Now notice this pushed our row span down. Actually, for the sake of clarity, I think I'm going to take out the row span from this. I'm going to take out all of our col spans or row spans. One other thing we might want to do with tables is you can put width 100% if you want it to automatically go across the page. Okay. I'm going to force the width and height on this a little bit. Okay, so we can keep digging deeper into this relationship and putting more and more stuff within other stuff. Sometimes it takes a little finagling to get the table to go the way you want it to. So let's see here. So I had to do a call spend 5 on this too to make it go all the way across. Okay, now you can make these very complex, and what you end up with in the very end. Yeah. Let me see if I can find an example of a complex one here. Okay, so here's some student work using tables within tables. You can see he's basically done an entire layout with tables here and some of the things here. Like, so this is a table row. It takes up the entire column, but yet see this table row has been divided in here. And then he's putting these other rows inside one table data, right? So he's got a pretty complex layer or layout here through using multiple tables and tables. Really, you can kind of break it up however you want. Let me see if I can find another good example here. So he had done a whole layout. This doesn't have the CSS with it, but he had done a whole layout where it was like a catalog, right? So there's some advanced stuff you can do. Folks, are our tables making sense so far? Okay. Any questions about them right now? Okay. Well, I will shut off the recording for now. I'll check on everyone's progress and then answer questions as needed.